All right, everybody, welcome. My name is Jocelyn Williams. I am a developmental movement consultant, and I am the founder and director of Neurolly Solutions, and I will be hosting tonight's event. Tonight's event is brought to us by the Indie Birth Alliance. The IBA, Indie Birth Alliance, is a group of birth professionals empowering a healthy birth community through support, service, education, and advocacy. We have just really enjoyed our summer series that started about 3 weeks ago, and we love the fact that we're getting repeat attendees and participants. So welcome back on board. We're going to continue this series through the first week in October, okay? It will be held every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, again, throughout August, September, and a little bit into October. So each week, we're going to continue to dive into different topics related to birth and infant development. We've talked about spinning babies already, okay? We talked about birth planning and doula support and VBAC, okay? We're going to get into pelvic floor, physical therapy, postpartum care. By the way, postpartum care is next week with Sally, the infant developmental sequence, and so much more. So tonight's agenda is very simple. We've already begun to welcome and introduce ourselves to one another. We did that before we started the recording, okay? We're gonna have a guest speaker tonight. Her name is Chavah. We're going to then talk about the infant developmental sequence. We're going to follow the infant developmental sequence with an open time of question and answers with Chavah. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. Tonight's webinar is entitled "Fertility Awareness is Not Your Grandma's Rhythm Method." Okay. Did I get that right, Chavah?
You did. We had a typo in there. It said rhyme method, but rhythm is the way to go.
Rhythm. So tonight our guest speaker is Chavah Hull. She is a fertility coach, a childbirth educator, and a birth doula. Chavah is a mom of 5. She's an educator, a speaker, and the owner and founder of Creating Space Birth Services. Chavah provides fertility coaching through the Chart Your Cycle program. And I can vouch for Chavah because I have worked personally with Chavah. We met through the IBA, and then we started chit-chatting and started bringing up some stuff and some personal stuff with her, and she said, I can help with that. And so I enjoyed my time, and I learned so much from Chavah. Okay, so she does provide fertility coaching through the, as I said, through the Chart Your Cycle program, and she helps women achieve or avoid pregnancy naturally without IVF, IUI, or hormonal contraception. Chavah is passionate about guiding, nursing, and postpartum women through effectively and confidently avoiding pregnancy without an IUD or the pill, okay? So Chavah, what of all the different things to work with the birth community on, why fertility coaching? Why is this your passion? I know you're passionate about it, but can you just tell us what drew you into this space, and what are you most passionate about? How did you get started in this?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Jocelyn, for that beautiful welcome. I'm so excited to be here with you ladies tonight. And for those who can't make it tonight watching the recording, I'm thrilled to be here. So a little bit about my background, and Jocelyn went into it. So I am trained as a doula and childbirth educator. As my family was getting bigger, and we grew our family quickly, and so we had a lot of littles, and to be on call was difficult. And so I started looking for an alternative to still be within the birthing world and helping moms around that postpartum time, early birth, but that didn't require the on-call time. And so I myself started charting my cycle back actually before we achieved our very first pregnancy, my husband and I. we knew that we were ready to start a family. And so we wanted to get things right and get things going. And that's where I first came across the idea of charting your cycle. And for me, it was to achieve a pregnancy. We did that within a couple months, which was awesome. I also had just recently come off the pill, so I was worried that we may not be able to. I probably know more now than what I did before, and I'd probably be more scared. So sometimes not being as knowledgeable has its benefits, but it's hard to get to underlying root causes when things don't go well. But once we decided to slow down and not have any more children for the moment, I began to chart my cycle in order to avoid pregnancy. But here's the thing. When I first found out about charting my cycle, I didn't realize that there was such a thing as a fertility coach. I did it all on my own through a do-it-yourself. I got the book, Taking Charge of Your Fertility, which if you are in the charting world at all, or you start to look into it, this is kind of the Bible of the fertility world and charting. It's Taking Charge of Your Fertility. But it's all a do-it-yourself. And we started doing it ourselves to avoid pregnancy, and we achieved. And we were like, oh, okay. So then it was an unexpected pregnancy, and I started to look for alternatives to doing the doula work. I actually found that you could get a fertility coach, and this person was a lifesaver for me, and almost a lifeboat. There was a time when we felt like I couldn't have another child at that moment because I just couldn't take that. There was a lot of fear and anxiety and overwhelm, and we had a lot of young children, and I'm like telling my husband, we can't mess this thing up again. I need a break. And this person came alongside and really helped me to walk through that time, getting me confident, helping to release some of that fear and anxiety, and getting me to a place to say, okay, like if we're ready to grow our family, we can do that and I can survive it. Because there was a time where I thought, I won't be able to survive right now another birth. I'm still trying to get through the postpartum period. I can't bring another baby. And so that's kind of my passion. That's why I love working with women in that postpartum period who are just had a baby and have that fear of, oh my goodness, we can't get pregnant, but I also don't want to go on the pill. I don't want to do the IUD. My history with that was really yucky. Like I had some major yuck. And so I knew that wasn't an option, but it almost became an option because I was so afraid to achieve again without that being my biggest desire. So now I love working with women in that same place to say, I know what you're feeling. I know what it's like. Let me help you get through that and find a better way.
That is awesome. I love that. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And I know can be a lot of complications with the pill. It seems like an easy fix, solution, that we can use for a variety of issues, but sometimes a lot of complications come from that. So let's go ahead and dive in, and let's start with what is fertility awareness and how effective can it really be?
Yeah, those are great questions. So fertility awareness is the process of taking ownership of your own body, to really take body literacy seriously and I like to say that our body speaks a language. And sadly, most of us aren't speaking that language because of society, because of culture. Women have really lost touch with their internal workings and the language their body speaks. And so it's really a re-education of learning. When I work with women, we are looking at some biomarkers, some main things. So you want to watch for bleeding. And this is normal. You hear this, you go to the doctor and your doctor says, when was your last period? What was the last day of your first menstrual cycle? So we're trained here in the West to know about our bleeding. So we track that. We're also looking at something called cervical fluid or cervical mucus. And this is as our estrogen rises in our body, about midway through your cycle, you're going to notice some cervical fluid. So have you ever noticed you go to wipe and sometimes it's just dry. You just wipe and it's done with. Sometimes you wipe and your hand literally like goes to the other side of the toilet. You're like, whoa, what was that? That is a sensation of lubrication where you have a lot of external mucus. And then the other biomarker that we're looking at is temperature. And so estrogen and mucus go together at the front end of your cycle. And then at the post end of your cycle, you're looking at progesterone and a temp shift. And so that's in a nutshell what fertility awareness is. We're trying to get you to pinpoint those days in your cycle when you're fertile and when you're not fertile. So how effective is it? So this is why I called tonight's webinar, Fertility Awareness is Not Your Grandma's Rhythm Method. Typically, when you think about fertility awareness or you hear about this idea of natural birth control, charting your cycle, we automatically think of something called the rhythm method. So the rhythm method happened a few generations ago, probably your grandma, this is what she was doing. She was going off a typical 28-day cycle and blindly starting at day 1 for her period, and then starting around day 10 or 12 through day 15 or 16. If you're wanting to avoid a pregnancy, you wouldn't have intercourse during that time. And then after that window is done, you could go back to having intercourse without fear of pregnancy. However, this had a very low effectiveness rate. It really does not work. So it is based off of a 28-day cycle, which is what we hear all the time as average, but actually only 13% of the population, so that's 13 women out of 100 are going to have that 28-day cycle. For them, it works perfectly. Not always, but ideally it works perfectly. For the rest of us, that's not very good. Are we okay on connection?
Every once in a while you fizzle out. So on that last sentence, you just fizzled out.
Okay, because I see my screen catching up. Okay.
You're good right now, yes.
Let me know if we need to do something different.
Absolutely.
So how is fertility awareness based off of education or off of research, evidence-based research, different than the rhythm method? So now we're not just looking at how many days since your last period before we start looking at what days to avoid. We're actually taking into account what your body is saying and looking at cervical mucus to watch when that fertile window opens. When you do that properly and you add in a cross-check, like taking your temperature, you are talking about a 96 to 98% effectiveness rate for typical use, meaning the average person engaging in this method will have a 95 to 98% effectiveness. Method effectiveness, meaning if you're a perfect use, it can be up to 99.5%, which is exactly where the pill is. We're talking about better statistics than the condom. It really is a very doable, reliable method if you are working with an instructor. So like I talked about earlier, I was doing it myself, right? A DIY. Typically the effectiveness rates are lower, but when you learn and bring someone alongside you, those numbers raise and you can be confident in what you're seeing.
You're good. Keep going.
Okay. So why would you choose this instead of a hormonal option, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're really serious about avoiding pregnancy, you might think, well, why wouldn't I just go with the pill? The problem is, especially in that postpartum period, when you're nursing, many of us who are already kind of in this holistic world, we're a little hesitant to add in anything that we don't want in our bodies. So we're already watching for toxins. We're already watching for, making sure we're using the right shampoo and the right soap. And we forget that what we ingest can actually have a major impact. And so I mentioned earlier that I had some yucky side effects with the pill. So for my own family, there's a lot of depression and anxiety.
You just froze there for a quick second. That's okay. You can keep going.
Yeah, I wonder if I should move. We'll keep going, but I can always
So just repeat that last sentence.
Yeah, so my family history is a lot of depression and anxiety and even bipolar struggles. And when I went on the pill, I started to have some of those same flare-ups that I knew would bring in our family. And so I quickly took myself off the pill. And so when you're in that postpartum time, when you're already struggling with just keeping things moving forward, feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxious, feeling stressed, you don't need an extra thing keeping you from tapping into, that intuition and that internal self. The pill is something that is likely to do that. You also have to understand that the pill is putting you into basically early menopause. So when you go on the pill, you're completely shutting down all ovulation. And you might say, well, I'm not ovulating anyway because I'm postpartum. But it's different because your body is still producing hormones it needs. It's producing oxytocin. It's producing levels of estrogen and things that it needs in order to nurse and breastfeed and bond with your baby. Even if you're not nursing, there are lots of hormones your body is releasing that you need to make that connection with your little one. And when you start adding...
So just to clarify, what you said a moment ago was that the pill will put you into early menopause?
Right. That's what it does. It basically puts you into a menopausal state because you stop ovulating. Ovulation is a sign of good health. We need to ovulate in order to know we're healthy. In the IUD, even if you go with a non-hormonal option, also has its side effects. When you're going with something like fertility awareness and you know that you have the highest effectiveness possible, you also are just taking things into your own hands and you're not relying on something else to get you to the results you want.
So with that said, if a mom was, or someone was interested, a woman was interested in charting, what exactly does it mean to live a charting lifestyle? So I don't want to be on the pill. There's too many side effects. It's throwing me into early menopause. I know that's not okay. It's messing with my moods or whatever have you. So I'm looking at this other option called charting lifestyle. Well, what does that exactly mean? What does that look like? Can you draw a picture for us?
Yeah, I think so. And I do think it's important to know that if you are looking for a quick fix, if you are looking for something that you don't have to dedicate time to, if you're looking to allow something else to control this part of your life, then charting your cycle is not really for you. Realistically, it does take commitment, right? When you learn a new language, it takes time and commitment. In order to chart your cycle to the best way possible, you're going to be checking for cervical mucus before and after you go to the restroom. You're going to be taking your temperature in the evening. You're also going to be watching any signs or symptoms you have that correspond with return of ovulation or with PMS. So there are things you're going to do. The thing to know, we okay?
Yeah.
I feel like we're really struggling.
You're okay. You're doing great.
Okay. Yeah, the internet, I feel like is.
Yes.
But when I work with women, we aren't just talking about a method of how to chart a cycle. We are talking about an overall lifestyle of being intentional about your health. So you're being intentional about what your body is saying to you. You're also being intentional about things like sleep. and diet, nutrition, and body movement. So we focus on a holistic set of goals and things to get our bodies to be as healthy as possible and incorporate charting your cycle.
You're okay. You're doing good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how a menstrual cycle might look different in the postpartum period compared to what you've seen before you got pregnant. So I have a really good guide. I'm going to actually give the link here in the chat that talks about the 5 most common cycle patterns. This is important for women who are postpartum in nursing because you fall into the last 2 cycle patterns mentioned, so number 4 and 5. Women who are nursing a child without supplementing, they will not see a return to fertility until their body is ready to do that. And so you might think, how can I chart if I haven't even had a period yet? What happens is your body is going to start indicating to you that you're ready to start ovulating. So you're going to start to see more mucus. So you really have to be in tune with that mucus. In the postpartum time, nursing moms either have a completely dry cycle until their first period. It's called cycle 0. So right after you have your baby, up until you have your first period, you're in this kind of no man's land of cycle 0. This varies from woman to woman on how long that takes. It is not true that as long as you're nursing a baby that you cannot get your period back or not ovulate. So there is a method based off of nursing your child that is very effective, but it is very strict. Most of us don't follow, even if we're nursing around the clock, you have baby, you're not probably following those rules. And I suggest you find an instructor if that's what you're interested in. But 33% of women, so that's roughly 1 out of 3 women, will ovulate before they ever have their first period. And so you can't think, I'll just wait till my period starts and then I'll know that fertility's returned. So in my own case, when we kind of had a surprise pregnancy, I didn't have a period anywhere between when I was nursing and when the next baby was born. I mistakenly thought as long as I didn't have a period and I was nursing my baby nonstop, then I wouldn't be able to. And that's just not the case. So when it comes to postpartum moms, you either have a very dry cycle or you have continual mucus. Either one of those are manageable, but those are the 2 patterns that you'll watch for in that postpartum period.
Awesome. So can I use fertility awareness to get pregnant naturally?
Oh, I love this. Okay, so we're flipping it on its head. So we've been talking about avoiding a pregnancy and what that looks like in the postpartum time. Before I leave that, I want to say that the postpartum time has a lot of ups and downs, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of stress. If you are thinking about utilizing a fertility awareness method, communicating with your partner, your spouse, is key. And really talking through the options that you have available to you, especially if you're not willing to go on some type of hormonal contraception or entering an IUD or a device into your body. And finding someone that you can work with, a coach, an educator, that can walk you through that process. Now, let's talk about how can I achieve a pregnancy using fertility awareness. So when you're tracking your cycle, you pinpoint when you're going to have intercourse around your intention. And so if your intention is to avoid pregnancy, you would, ideally, you're going to abstain during the fertile window in order to get your highest effectiveness. Some couples choose to use a barrier method, such as a condom or a diaphragm, a cervical cap, which are viable, totally doable options. But again, finding a fertility coach who's knowledgeable in making sure those methods are being used to the best of their abilities. When you want to achieve a pregnancy, we talk about something called fertility-focused intercourse. So instead of avoiding that, this is when you're going to have as much sex as possible. You want to make sure you time that intercourse to getting you pregnant. So the question is, what if I've struggled to achieve a pregnancy and I'm pregnant now, or we're postpartum now, but we had to use IVF or IUI or fertility medication in order to achieve a pregnancy? Can this really help me? So in the program that I run called Chart Your Cycle, we partner with medical providers around the US who are versed, they're called restorative reproductive medicine doctors. And so they have specialized training in the root cause of reasons why you may have struggled with infertility. Those reasons can be as simple as you actually weren't timing intercourse correctly, or they can be a little more complicated, like the cervical mucus wasn't adequate. So one thing we know, you hear a lot about egg quality. So if you're anywhere familiar with fertility options like IUI or IVF for achieving a pregnancy, AMH or egg quality is something that's always talked about. What's rarely talked about is cervical mucus. What we now know is that cervical mucus is key to achieving pregnancy. The reason is because the vagina is a very acidic environment. It is made to destroy anything that gets in there as a protective mechanism. It doesn't differentiate between something you might want there. It will obliterate it if it can. The only way it stays protected is if you have good quality cervical mucus in order to help put a protective barrier around that acidic environment and help the sperm get to where it needs to go. And so a lot of focus when it comes to working with clients who have struggled to achieve pregnancies in the past is getting that cervical mucus to a level it needs to be at. The other thing is women who struggle with things like PCOS or endometriosis, a lot of times are told that they have unexplained infertility and aren't given a lot of reasons why. With the doctors that we work with who have special training in utilizing fertility awareness as well as root cause medicine, meaning they're really trying to get to the underlying cause of why you're sick or why you're not achieving a pregnancy or why you're not ovulating, we look at achieving a pregnancy or avoiding a pregnancy as a bonus to getting you healthy. And you want to be healthy in order to achieve a viable pregnancy. And so that's how using fertility awareness can get you there naturally, by finding a good educator or coach, and then being able to partner with a restorative reproductive medicine doctor who's willing to really get to the underlying root cause of unexplained infertility or infertility struggles.
That's awesome. So now, we talked about how to avoid a pregnancy, how to achieve a pregnancy. Oh no, oh my goodness, now I'm pregnant. Yep. How can you support me? And then once this baby is born, what do I do with the baby? What does the baby need?
Yeah, so finding that, tell me again the question.
So we've talked about avoiding pregnancy.
Yeah.
Achieving pregnancy.
Got it. Okay. I know what we're doing. Yeah. So this is great. So we've talked about ways to keep our bodies moving forward and having control over what we're doing if we're trying to achieve a pregnancy or avoid a pregnancy, and not introducing all kinds of outside factors that may not need to be there. one thing that is important to remember is we need to get our own health as moms under control, but we also need to be aware of the health of our child. And you're probably thinking, well, of course I'm worried about the health of my child. Like, what else is there to worry about? But just like fertility awareness it's not actually taught in medical schools, most doctors don't know about it. Jocelyn can attest to this but proven fact of the developmental sequence that a child needs to go through in order to make sure they're meeting all of those milestones they need to, that they're having the correct biomarkers, if you will, that a woman needs to have. And so I'd love, Jocelyn, for you to share a little bit about what you do and how you help moms once they're kind of helping themselves and they're ready to focus on their child a little bit more, what they can do to keep their baby moving at the best developmental way possible.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for talking to us about fertility awareness, fertility coaching. And we've got some comments here. Wow, this is also helpful. And I know that our guests probably have more questions. So before I dive into explaining about the infant developmental sequence, I just want to open up the chat room and just bring everyone's attention to the chat room and just say, go ahead, if you have any other questions that come to mind based on Chava's presentation, go ahead and type those in. And Chava, if you want to, while I'm talking about the infant developmental sequence, if you want to log out real quick and come back in to see if that helps with the glitching, you're welcome to do that, okay? And we'd also love for you to type in the chat room how we can get more information from you and connect with you. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. So the infant developmental sequence. So why would we even talk about this today? We have mamas on here who are just newly expecting, and then we have mamas on with us today that haven't achieved a pregnancy quite yet, okay? So why would we dive into talking about the infant developmental sequence at this point? I'll tell you a little bit about my story and in hopes of explaining the why, okay? For us, we have 5 kiddos, and 3 of our kids are adopted, 2 are biological, and we had some of our kids were just really, really struggling, and we were doing everything we knew to do the traditional way, good old-fashioned traditional discipline and parenting, lots of love and affection, and just for some of our kids, things were just getting worse and not better. We even tried early intervention. We did, again, all the standard things, traditional things to help them. And I came across this program called Neurodevelopmental Movement. And Neurodevelopmental Movement is based on the infant developmental sequence, which we're going to talk about. And so I took a couple of my kids, we walked through this process called Neurodevelopmental Movement. And I began to see significant changes in their lives, just for the better. I became trained in the same method or pathway, and then began working with clients. And the thought kept coming to my mind, wow, I wish I had this information before my kids were born. Because had I known, we wouldn't be doing this when they are 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And so the more I worked with my clients, I heard them saying the same thing. I wish I had this information. I would have done this when my child was born. And so that developed in me a passion. I just thought, I never want anybody to go through what I have gone through. I wouldn't change my road because that's my story and that's our journey. And I love my kids, and I'm so grateful for where we are today. But boy, if I could make it easier for another mama, I want to. And so with that said, while some of you are with us online are thinking about becoming pregnant and some of you are just newly pregnant, this is the perfect time to learn about the infant developmental sequence. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and do just a 5-minute, I mean, I can talk about this for hours, but I'm just going to give you just a quick 5-minute summary of what the infant developmental sequence is, and then we'll go back to Chavah, okay? So give me 1 second while I share my screen. Okay, so do you see the screen okay? Do you see the slideshow?
So I see your notes up too. So I see more than the slideshow.
Well then let's stop sharing that and try again. We're having some technical difficulties today, huh? Okay, let's start there.
There you go. That's good.
Are we good? Okay. And you can still see it? Beautiful. All right. So let me just move this over here. And we're just about okay to get started. So, again, my name is Jocelyn Williams. I am the founder and director of Neurolly Solutions, also known as Neurolly. And so we provide a movement-based educational approach to equipping the infant brain for life, okay? Our work is based on the infant developmental sequence, okay? The infant developmental sequence is what every human infant was designed to go through. It is a very simple process, but it is a necessary process because this work that our little babies, our little infant babies are supposed to go through actually helps to develop the foundational levels of the brain. Now, let's think about that for a second here. When a baby is born, they don't have access to their hand, right? They have a hand, but they can't fully use it yet. It's the same thing with their brain. They have a brain, but they can't access all the levels of the brain. So that first level of the brain, that foundational level of the brain, that part of the brain is developed through the infant developmental sequence, which includes movement, patterns, and sensory input. Okay, now it's so important that the infants go through this process because that foundational level of the brain cannot learn by logic. It needs the movement, it needs the patterns, it needs the sensory input, okay? And it affects, that part of the brain affects all of their automatic functions, such as bonding, emotional regulation, sensory processing, and so much more. Now, the infant developmental sequence is a process, as I said, it's very simple. I like to say that it's as simple as A, B, and C. But what's important to note is that the infant developmental sequence needs to occur, this portion that I'm going to go over with you tonight needs to occur before the baby starts walking. Before the baby starts walking, they need to go through this process. So what exactly is the process, okay? And again, this is just, there's other components to it, but this is just a quick summary. Let's begin. A, from birth, infants need to be on their tummies approximately 50% of a 24-hour period. We like to call this tummy all the time, okay? So they're up in your arms and you feed them, nurse them, and then back on their belly. Their default position is belly. I get a lot of questions about baby wearing. Baby wearing has its place, but it should not be the baby's default position. Babies should go back on their tummies. Why? Why is that? Because tummy all the time will lead to tummy crawling. So the B represents the belly, okay? And the baby should be tummy crawling with their belly button flat on the ground and the baby moving forward, okay? This form of movement is very similar to an army crawl, but it's not exact, okay? And here's just a little tip. If a baby doesn't need mittens, they do not need socks. And when a baby is engaging in tummy crawling, all the baby needs is a comfortable onesie, a nice cozy temperature in their environment, and a safe floor to crawl on, okay? From there, at approximately 6 to 12 months, babies will begin to creep, so C for creep on their hands and knees, okay? Now notice the position of the baby. The baby is up on all fours and the belly button is no longer touching the ground. Babies should continue creeping until their creep is developed into an efficient cross-lateral movement, okay? The infant, the developmental sequence is, as I said, it's so important because when the infant engages in the infant developmental sequence, they are given equal access and opportunity to equip those foundational levels. Here are some examples. One, a baby who's bonded. That is so crucial. To be bonded to your primary caretaker will have profound effects later on in life, okay? Two, a child who is socially, emotionally equipped to have healthy peer interactions. How often do we now hear about bullying? Many of those kids that are struggling through bullying many times have missed significant parts of their infant developmental sequence. Three, a student who's able to learn well. Right now, the CDC reports 1 in 7 children have either mental, behavior, or developmental delay. Children are struggling to focus, to sit still in class. Why? Oftentimes it's because they have so many retained reflexes because they've missed their infant developmental sequence. 4, an adult who has the strength needed to make a positive global impact, okay? So in summary, the infant developmental sequence is as simple as A, B, and C. However, that process needs to happen, at least this part of the process needs to happen before they are walking. And if so, the impact will be profound, okay? The infant developmental sequence, I want to make a note that it is not a man-made program. This isn't something I, designed or my teachers designed. It is a process that was designed for every human infant to go through, okay? And it just so happens to be that scientists observed, and physicians, not just scientists, but a team observed infants all over the world engaging in this process, okay? So we know that it's very important, okay? At Neurolly, not only do we work with infants, but we also work with children and students and adults. Why? Because we can replicate the infant developmental sequence, okay? So those who've missed it, we can replicate it. Our process is super simple. One, you just contact one of our developmental movement consultants, and we can set up either a video assessment or an in-person assessment, and that happens with the baby and the primary caretaker and the consultant, okay? The consultant will review the results of the assessment and provide training in the elements of the infant developmental sequence that his or her baby needs, okay? The primary caretaker will then be given a daily movement plan and support protocols to ensure that their baby has equal access and opportunity to complete the infant developmental sequence, okay? As I stated before, for older children, for students and adults, we replicate the developmental sequence, and this pathway is called neurodevelopmental movement, and it is based on neuroplasticity. Isn't it amazing that the designer, the original designer of the infant developmental sequence, some of them might miss it. So we're going to give them a second chance. The brain is plastic, okay? So when given the right triggers, the brain is able to change. And so we can replicate it and we can give them a second chance. I love that. I love that we get second chances, okay? If you want more information about this, you can type out some questions in the chat box there, or you can contact me. My name, again, is Jocelyn Williams. My phone number is 317-936-6797. I can be reached at jwilliams@nsibrain.com or on social media at Neurolly Solutions. So mamas and mamas to be, it's so important. If there's one golden nugget that I could leave you with today, let your babies spend ample amount of time on their tummies. They need lots of movement. It is so good for their brain. And if your babies do not want to be on their tummies, get in contact with a developmental movement consultant, because there's usually a reason why, and we can work with you to figure it out. All right, so with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's head back over to Chavah. Okay, so Chavah, we are back. Okay.
Good. Thanks
All right,
for that, Jocelyn.
You're welcome. So some of the questions that come to mind. How long does this take? Like you said, there's a time commitment. So exactly what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So,
and by the way, and if I want to connect with you, right?
yeah.
What does an appointment look like? Is it 45 minutes? Is it an hour? Do I have to see you every month, every 2 weeks? But what does this all entail?
Yeah. So the program that me and a colleague have created, Melissa Buchan. So if you look in the chat, I put in some resources. So one is a free guide to understanding the 5 most common cycles, and then also a link to schedule a discovery call. But the program that Melissa and I have created is for busy moms. So when you join, you get all of the information, all of the educational material online. So you get to watch that at your own pace. It literally can be done in a 2 to 3 hour time span if you are just cycling through. Then you have the option of one-on-one coaching or group coaching, as well as the community of other women that are in the program. So it's literally made for busy moms. And I know that we're all busy, right? The way we have structured this is it's a membership. So you join and you get all of the foundational course information. And then you choose month by month if you need to stay and have the extra support, or if you've gotten what you need and you're ready to do this on your own. So it becomes a very viable solution, especially during that postpartum time when there's just a lot of uncertainty and you're not sure yet when your cycle is going to return. When it comes to group coaching and one-on-one, you get access to myself or a coach for an hour to go over your chart. And we are utilizing an online app to track your fertility called Chart Neo. And the amazing thing about that is when you join, you actually can share your chart virtually. And so we do everything online, which we're all familiar with now, being in the state of things that we are. So I hope that answered, Jocelyn. So you basically commit to as long as you need to take in the information and the support you need. And it's created to be that way.
Okay. All right. That is super good to know. Can you leave us with one golden nugget? What's one thing that you want us to walk away with tonight? And before you give us that golden nugget, I'm going to just jump in here and do a little commercial break. Okay? I would like to let everyone know that we are going to continue with this series next week. Okay? So our Indie Birth Alliance Education Series, hosted by myself, Jocelyn Williams of Neurolly Solutions, will continue each Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Registration is open on Eventbrite, and our next guest speaker is Sally Wiggins. Sally Wiggins is the birth and postpartum doula. Her business is called Best Beginnings Doula Services. And Sally has a passion to really help support and educate pregnant women before birth, during birth, and after birth. Okay, especially now during this season of COVID-19, where a lot of our mamas, first-time mamas, are isolated and have very limited social interactions. She just has had a burden or a passion to provide support. So to learn more about postpartum support, we invite you to join us. You'll find the link in the chat room, or if you're watching this recording as a recording, you can go onto Eventbrite, or you can visit us at indiebirthalliance.org in order to register. Okay, so as we begin to wrap up here, Chavah, what is one golden nugget that you want us to leave with tonight?
Yeah, and I think it applies to all of our talks. We are taught from a very young age that we are not the expert of our own body. This includes having our children. It includes when we're pregnant, postpartum, fertility, that we are not the expert, that we need someone else to help us. And what I want to say is that we are, in fact, the expert of our own bodies and of our own children. That there is a thing called intuition that for a lot of us, it's been pushed down. And my passion is to help women to learn how to connect with that intuition, realizing it's a muscle. And the more you use it and the more you confidently understand what it is that your body is telling you and what your intuition is telling you, the easier it becomes to be confident and to have your own autonomy over your health choices and your health journey.
I love that. Thank you so much, Chavah. It has been a pleasure meeting with you tonight. Thank you for teaching us about fertility and a little bit about charting our own cycles, achieving pregnancy, avoiding pregnancy, and we talked a little bit today about what do we do once the baby's born. So It has been an absolute pleasure. And I think you're just a gem, by the way. And I love your family. Love your family. Your kids are just so precious. So thank you again. And thank you to all who have participated. Have a good night. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yep. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye. Chavah, you are welcome to stay on.
Okay. I think you're still recording.